In a lot of anime, there are fights in which the true strongest between two fighters or the true winner of a fight is not always answered directly by the story. Series like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or Hunter x Hunter are filled with fights in which incredibly unique abilities are at play, which make it hard to definitively say between two combatants who was ultimately stronger and who would have ultimately won in a fair, uninterrupted fight. Unfortunately, for the most part, Dragon Ball is not like those series. Most of the time, the stronger person in any given fight is made pretty obvious, usually because they win by overpowering their opponent with various levels of ease. Even in fights where the stronger fighter does lose, it's usually because they got jumped, making the levels of power perfectly clear. However, there is one fight above all others in Dragon Ball that does not follow this trend. A fight that is probably, at least on the surface, the most ambiguous in all of Dragon Ball. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. Today, we're talking about Piccolo versus Android 17, one of the single best and closest fights in all of Dragon Ball, and yet one that was completely cut short, leaving the answer of who would have ultimately won kind of up in the air. So today, I'm going to be breaking down every possible factor of this legendary fight to figure out who would have won between Piccolo and Android 17. If you like this kind of stuff, make sure to like, subscribe, and let's jump right in. Now, like any Dragon Ball power scaling topic, we need to just divide the information between the anime and manga versions of events, as there are some places where they are identical and other where there are some slight differences. Regardless of continuity, both versions are pretty short, at least compared to other well-liked fights, lasting essentially only 2 chapters in the manga and 2 chapters in the anime. Despite that, this battle gives us a lot to go over. For this scenario, if it wasn't obvious, we are talking about the exact versions of Piccolo and 17, as pretty much every other version obviously means Piccolo is either substantially stronger or weaker than 17. So to begin, before even looking at the fight, we need to cover the powers and abilities of both fighters, as for once, it actually really matters. This is one of the few fights in the whole series that doesn't have any Saiyan in it whatsoever, and both androids and Namekians happen to have a lot of really unique abilities that matter in a fight, unlike Saiyans. Let's start with the powers and abilities of Android 17. Now, as an android, 17 has access to the infinite energy generator alongside his sister, Android 18. This means essentially 2 things. 1, they can never run out of stamina in a fight, and 2, their energy cannot be sensed, as it's an artificial and undetectable type of ki. While in practice, this means that 17 can fight at essentially full power the entire time during a fight, there are some major misconceptions about how this battery works. While an android can use their full power at all times with no concern, this does not mean that their full power stays the same the entire time in a fight. We see this pretty clearly during the Tournament of Power, that while Android 17 was not fatigued in the final fight against Jiren, he does not perform any better than base Goku and Frieza, despite having previously fought alongside Golden Frieza and Blue Goku without any issue. This is because damage and injuries in Dragon Ball can lower one's full power, something that we see multiple times throughout the franchise. It's just that in most instances, it's insanely hard to actually injure the androids because they're always going at max power. Just look at Future Gohan versus the androids. Even though he could overpower both of them at the same time, he could never land a critical blow to turn the tide of the battle and ultimately lost. At least in Z, Android 17 isn't all that amazing of a fighter yet, as he has no actual martial arts training. We see him use really only basic energy blasts throughout the entire series and using the barrier technique, which we'll talk about during the fight analysis. Piccolo also has a lot of unique stuff going on, though notoriously tends to use strong abilities one time and then needs to be reminded that he has them later on. Regardless, while 17 has infinite stamina on his side, Piccolo has skill and regeneration on his. As Namekian, Piccolo can of course regenerate from any critical blows, but can still be worn down and overpowered with critical hits, which is frequently how he loses fights, making him unable to regenerate as it takes energy to do so. Piccolo is one of the smartest characters in the entire series, even before he absorbs Kami and gains all of his wisdom, and that is seen through his techniques. Piccolo has some of the most potent one-shot ki abilities in the entire series, including his tracking ki blasts, special beam cannon, and as we see in this arc, the light and Hell Zone grenade. Even back when it was first used, the special beam cannon was such a massive multiplier to Piccolo's power that he was able to take on characters multiple times his strength, and by the Cell Saga, he can almost casually fire these things off with years of training and power level boosts since then. So when these factors come together, what actually happened during the fight? Let's break it down page by page. Piccolo begins the fight by removing his weighted clothing, something that he had not done against Cell, and immediately powers up. 17, ironically, cannot sense normal ki, so he has no idea that Piccolo has gotten stronger since fusing with Kami. Only 16, who actually does have an energy sensor, is aware of this change. Piccolo is confident that he might be able to win this, and even killing one android will be enough to stop Cell. The fight begins with Piccolo immediately blitzing 17, knocking him to the ground before firing a ki blast, with 17 escaping the attack and the smoke of the resulting explosion. From this immediate exchange, 17 has already visibly taken damage from Piccolo's hits, with blood running down his mouth as Piccolo prepares and fires the Hellzone grenade. This attack was done in direct response to 17 running away the first time, creating a ki blast attack that Piccolo thinks 17 won't be able to escape like before, which is successful as the attack does indeed trap and land on 17, it's just that he has a barrier that blocks it. We get told in the Daizenshu that the barrier requires a output 2 times higher than the attack to cancel it, meaning 17's barrier was at least twice as strong as Piccolo's Hellzone grenade. Does this mean that 17 was twice as strong as Piccolo? No, as Piccolo immediately after says he's only just getting started, with 17 moving the fight to a new island. So in this first exchange, Piccolo I think is the clear winner here, as 17 literally does not land a single hit or throw a single counterattack. At the start of round 2, 17 claims he's going to be serious this time, showing that ultimately both of them had been holding back. It's here where 17 lands some nasty hits on Piccolo while also dodging his attacks repeatedly. However, in the last exchange, Piccolo was able to dodge again, both of them now visibly damaged, as Piccolo claims that while 17 is fast, doesn't actually hit very hard. It's here where the fight becomes much more even, with Piccolo and 17 landing hits, blocking and dodging each other's attacks pretty much in equal frequency. The final exchange of the fight has 17 kicking Piccolo before getting blasted by a ki blast and sent flying backwards. Piccolo is panting and out of breath, with 17 stating that even though they have equal strength, he has the stamina advantage. And then Cell arrives, leaving what would have happened next ambiguous, hence the point of this video. So what do we know from this? It seems like Piccolo is slightly stronger while 17 is slightly faster, but ultimately such differences are negligible, with Daizenshu guides supporting this, saying that they were fighting evenly and that neither had an advantage over the other. If this is true, then 17 would simply eventually win like he says, because Piccolo is going to run out of energy and he won't. However, I don't think that this would necessarily happen based on what immediately follows. The powered up Imperfect Cell essentially one-shots Android 17 without even using any aura, and yet immediately after seemingly powers up more to fight off Piccolo, who manages to take several more hits than 17 did. It's after this beatdown that Piccolo charges up a Hellzone grenade that does 0 damage to Cell, and 17 just barely manages to dodge out of the way of. While the manga doesn't say anything about this attack, anime guides tell us that this attack would have instantly killed Android 17 on contact. So now we know that Piccolo actually does have a win condition, and it's simply hitting Android 17 with a light grenade. But could he actually do it? So there are a couple of things to think about here. While yes, 17 managed to jump out of the way of the light grenade, the attack was not aimed at him and he was not that close to it when it was fired. So this does not mean he would have dodged it with ease if he were standing in Cell's place. Secondly, the Piccolo who fired that light grenade was far more injured than the one who was simply panting a little bit before Cell arrived, meaning Piccolo would have been in an even more peak condition to fire it in the scenario against 17. This is also supported by how right after Cell arrived, a non-powered up ki blast from Piccolo was able to tag 17. And I think it's safe to say that the more charged up an attack is, the higher its power level and faster its speed. Think about it this way. If Piccolo jumped away and began charging an attack, if 17 doesn't immediately run and hide somewhere, what is he supposed to do? If he tries to charge up his own attack and blast Piccolo, he's getting overpowered as his techniques are just objectively worse. Rush in, he's getting hit point blank. A barrier, it's simply getting shattered by an attack far more than 2 times Piccolo and 17's power level. I also don't think it's very unreasonable for Piccolo to actually try this, because clearly when backed into a corner by Cell, firing this attack was the first thing he thought about doing, and I don't see why 17 would be any different. In fact, Piccolo being overall the stronger combatant than 17 seems to be supported by guides once again, as Imperfect Cell is hyped up for being stronger than Piccolo and not for being stronger than 17, even though he fought both of them at once, at least to me, clearly implying that Piccolo was the overall stronger stronger of the two, infinite energy or not. The only way 17 can win is if someone as smart as Piccolo fused with Kami learned nothing from Vegeta's mistake against Android 18 and lets himself get fully worn down until he can no longer keep up. I just don't see that happening. So personally, my money is on Piccolo. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If there are any other inconclusive or close fights in Dragon Ball that you'd like to see me cover in this way, please let me know. As always, thank you to my members, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya!